homophobic, racist, misogynistic.
Britain stands at a critical juncture. The debate over class, privilege, and fairness has taken center stage, fueled by Labour's fiery rhetoric and bold policies. Angela Rayner's controversial comments, branding conservative elites as scum, have divided the nation. On one side, supporters see Labour as champions of the working class, fighting against entrenched privilege. On the other, critics accuse them of waging class warfare, alienating aspirational families in rural communities. Today, we'll uncover the truth behind Labour's VAT proposal on private schools and the inheritance tax reforms that have sparked nationwide protests. Are these policies steps toward fairness, or do they risk dividing the country even further? Let's dive into the heart of Britain's political storm, where ambition clashes with equity and leadership faces its ultimate test. Angela Rayner has never shied away from controversy. Known for her sharp language, she recently reignited debates over privilege and fairness with her scathing remarks about conservative politicians. While her infamous scum comment from the 2021 Labour Party conference was aimed at Tory MPs, it has been twisted into narratives targeting institutions like Eton and private school students. Critics argue that her rhetoric inflames divisions rather than inspiring change. Her delivery, filled with venom and passion, reflects Labour's broader strategy of energizing its base. But is this approach helping or hurting their cause? Supporters believe Rayner's words resonate with those who feel ignored by the elite, especially as the cost of living crisis deepens. They see her as a voice for the disenfranchised, unafraid to challenge privilege. Critics, however, accuse her of fostering resentment, calling her approach divisive and counterproductive. At the heart of Labour's education policy lies their proposal to impose VAT on private school fees. This policy is framed as a step toward equity, redirecting funds from elite institutions to underfunded state schools. On paper, the proposal could generate significant revenue to improve education access for millions. However, the reality is far more complex. Critics argue that this move will force middle-income families to abandon private education, overcrowding already strained state schools. Private schools, which already face rising costs, may become even more exclusive, benefiting only the wealthiest families. The policy has also reignited debates about fairness. Is it right to penalize families striving to provide better opportunities for their children? Labour defends the policy as necessary to address systemic inequalities, but opponents see it as punitive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a few weeks ago from that dispatch box, the Minister for Rural Affairs said that he'd been congratulated by a farmer over the introduction of the inheritance tax. Now, I think this farmer must have been a cannabis farmer, because just yesterday we had 10,000 farmers on Whitehall protesting against this madcap decision. So does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that this decision should be thrown in the trash can along with Rachel from Accounts' CV?
Well, Mr. Speaker,
A blow to aspiration and hard work. Labour's proposed inheritance tax changes have sparked outrage in rural Britain. Farmers and small landowners, already struggling with Brexit-related trade challenges, rising costs, and unpredictable weather, fear these reforms could push them to the brink. The policy, according to Labour, targets only the wealthiest estates. However, rural communities argue that the thresholds could ensnare family-run farms, forcing them into financial hardship or even land sales. Protests outside Westminster, with over 10,000 farmers in attendance, highlight the growing mistrust of Labour's intentions. For many rural voters, this policy symbolizes Labour's disconnect from their realities. While Angela Rayner and Labour leadership insists small farms won't be affected, the messaging has been muddled, leaving room for misinterpretation. Critics accuse Labour of prioritizing urban voters while ignoring the challenges faced by rural communities. Labour's struggle to connect with rural voters isn't new. The party's policies often focus on urban challenges, leaving rural communities feeling neglected. The inheritance tax row has only deepened this divide, with critics accusing Labour of targeting the very people they claim to support.
Talks about CVs. It's good to see the honourable member doing well on his bench, once a Labour councillor, then a Tory MP, and now a Reform Chief Whip. behind what we've done to support our farmers, and we'll continue to support the farmers, and we'll continue to invest in our public services to get Britain back on track.
The protests signal more than opposition to a single policy. They represent a broader frustration with what rural voters see as Labour's inability to address their concerns. If Labour fails to bridge this gap, they risk losing a crucial voter base to opposition parties eager to exploit these vulnerabilities. Labour's critique of private schools like Eton underscores their broader goal of challenging entrenched privilege. These institutions argue that they already contribute to society through scholarships and partnerships with state schools. But Labour sees them as symbols of inequality, benefiting the few at the expense of the many. The VAT proposal has intensified debates about the role of private schools in British society. Supporters argue that taxing these institutions is a step toward leveling the playing field, while opponents see it as an attack on families striving to give their children the best opportunities. Labour's education and tax proposals reflect their commitment to addressing inequality, but they come with significant risks. By targeting private schools and inheritance tax, Labour positions itself as a champion of fairness. However, these policies risk alienating middle-income families in rural communities, further polarizing the electorate. The challenge for Labour is to balance bold reforms with clear messaging. Policies that seem punitive or divisive can undermine their credibility, especially when opponents frame them as attacks on aspiration and ambition. These debates reveal a deeper divide in Britain: urban versus rural, privilege versus fairness. Labour's policies appeal to those frustrated by years of inequality, but risk alienating others who value ambition and hard work. The Conservatives, meanwhile, have capitalized on these tensions, framing Labour's proposals as evidence of class warfare. Lee Anderson's sharp critique of Labour's inheritance tax reforms reflects this strategy, resonating with rural voters while casting doubt on Labour's leadership. As these debates rage on, one question looms large. What kind of country does Britain want to be? Labour's vision of fairness faces strong resistance, while the Conservatives must tackle inequality without alienating their base. The choices made now will shape Britain's future. Will Labour succeed in their mission to create a fairer society, or will their bold policies deepen the divides they aim to heal? Only time will tell. If you're passionate about these issues, join our free Telegram group and be part of the conversation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more in-depth analyses of Britain's pressing challenges.